2 weeks ago, on the Dockery Docket, Joe Biden's ship was dead in the water, but somehow something miraculous happened as the water started to leave the boat and he is starting to take sail again. We now go back to Captain Joe Biden and what he has to say now that he is back on the campaign. Sir, I don't know how you did it, but it looks like the water is leaving our boat. I told you, you were a lying dog-faced pony soldier. I knew we had a great campaign. I'm so glad that people are starting to trust me to be their senator. I knew that the African American vote would come in and rescue me because I told them the story about an African American woman who I knew a long time ago. Sir, I don't want to hear your story again, okay? I've heard it multiple times. And also, I definitely do want to apologize to you. This is why you are the captain and I am the second in command. Wait a minute. Did you just say that you were running for Senate? No. I don't know what you're talking about. First of all, you should know that I'm running for president. And second of all, you should definitely know that I am also... Why am I stopping? Where am I again? Hey, I think this victory has gotten to your head. How about you go and, lay down for a little bit? Yeah, that's a great idea. It definitely takes a lot of effort to win the great state of Georgia, which I absolutely love the people of Georgia. Sir, I'm sure you do. You really need to make sure that you take a good rest. Okay, Lieutenant. I'll make sure to definitely go down and take a rest. And hopefully we can win the next state. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. This is our very 16th episode of the Dockery Docket. And I am personally very, very happy to be here, and I hope that you are happy to be here as well, as we have a lot of news to go over, and I'm very excited about it. Just today, Saturday, we had the South Carolina primaries coming in, and I will be honest with you, I was freaking out a little bit, because I have this whole episode laid out for when Joe Biden wins it, and so I'm sitting there, and I'm hoping, and I'm praying that Joe Biden will somehow, some way, win the South Carolina primary. And luckily for us, he did. And this is starting to put more boost into Joe Biden's campaign, which is very, very exciting. We can see that he is starting to build more momentum. And maybe Joe Biden will be the one that comes out from the ashes and absolutely destroys Bernie Sanders. We hope, okay? That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping. But if it's not Joe Biden, then more than likely it'll be Donald Trump who absolutely obliterates Bernie Sanders, and that will be in the general election. So, before we even talk about Joe Biden, because Joe Biden had a lot of gaffes this week, he was on the struggle bus all week long, okay? But first, I want to talk a little bit more about Bernie Sanders. So last week, I made a whole episode talking about how terrible Bernie Sanders was. Do y'all remember it? Did you all watch it? Did you all like it? Anyway, I made this whole big episode, and I was like, this episode is perfect. You know, I added everything that Bernie Sanders had ever said about communism, socialism. I put it all in. It was good to go. Fantastic. Then, on Sunday, Bernie Sanders was on 60 Minutes, and he absolutely blew my mind away. Bernie Sanders praised Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro, that's right, the communist, authoritarian dictator from Cuba who killed multiple people. And so Bernie Sanders is on 60 Minutes, and he's like, well, Cuba, they had a great literacy program. And Anderson Cooper's like, but Fidel Castro also locked up millions of people. Killed people that were against him in the government. He also killed gay people and all this stuff. And Bernie Sanders is like, well, not everything that he did was bad. There were some things that he did were good. He gave them free health care. Now, this is just absolutely ridiculous for Bernie to say. I mean, the people of Cuba have suffered so much. And it's like, oh, well, at least you can read. I'm getting shot in the head, but, well, I can read about it. My people are suffering on the streets, but I can read about it. So let's just imagine for 1 second if Donald Trump got on one of these news programs on 60 Minutes, ABC News, something else, and he said,
Yes, Mussolini killed millions of people and caused political problems around the world, but at least the trains ran on time. He was fantastic in that.
the media would rip Donald Trump up and down, and they would call him a fascist more than what they already are doing right now. But apparently, Bernie Sanders saying, oh, Fidel Castro's a great man, doesn't label Bernie as a full-out communist. That makes no sense to me. Donald Trump, a literal fascist, never praised fascism, never praised Hitler or Mussolini, but definitely a fascist. Bernie Sanders praises all of these different communist authoritarian leaders, and he's fine. Now, Bernie did get some fire from this, and a lot of people were angry about this statement, both Democratic and Republican, which I was very happy about, because I think people understand just how terrible the Fidel Castro regime is, and especially people from Florida, as there are more Cuban Americans, as Cuban Americans tried to escape Fidel Castro and his grip. They had different trucks. They used old trucks, and they made them into rafts, just so then they could try and get to America, try to get to Florida. And so basically, for now, if Bernie Sanders gets the nomination, Florida's gone for him. Florida's gone. Donald Trump just has to play this clip. So usually, when there's media backlash about something that happens, usually the person who's running will come out and say, hey, that wasn't really nice of me to say, and he tries to pander back the votes that he lost. He'll say, I didn't mean it in this way, but I actually meant it in this way. But instead, Bernie doubled down on his rhetoric by, get this, praising another communist authoritarian regime in China. Bernie said in a CNN town hall that China is an authoritarian country, becoming more and more authoritarian. But can anyone deny the facts are clear, that they have taken more people out of extreme poverty than any other country? Listen, this guy is horrible. Bernie Sanders is terrible. Why is it that the Democrats are supporting him so much? He openly praised China, a communist country, and Cuba, a communist country. If you don't believe that Bernie Sanders is a communist, then you are wrong, because he definitely is. But luckily, people on the debate stage, as there was yet another Democratic debate. It seems like every single state that they go to, there's another debate. Bernie Sanders was on the debate stage. He had his crazy fingers out and his hair was crazy and all this stuff. And Bernie was doing this whole Castro was a great guy and all this stuff. And the people in the crowd actually booed Bernie. And Bernie was like, really? Really? And it's like, yes, apparently people don't like it when you praise a communist authoritarian regime. I mean, light bulb moment. Of course people don't like that. Of course people don't think that that is an okay thing to do. And the only good thing that came out of this debate was that Bernie looked like an absolute crazy person and was ranting and raving. We also discovered his Achilles heel. His Achilles heel is when people talk about how much all of his programs are going to cost. And it's when people boo him. Like I just explained beforehand, when he was talking about Castro being a great person and people booed him, he completely went unfringed. He just went wild. He went berserk. And also when he was talking to Pete Buttigieg about how much all of his programs are going to cost, he was absolutely going crazy. And it got into this screaming match between Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders. And it was actually great because they're both like, let's talk about the math. And Buttigieg is like, yes, let's talk about the math. And then they just started screaming all over each other. And it was just all a bunch of craziness. And these candidates don't look stable at all, especially Bernie. Speaking of unstable, this episode isn't going to all be about Bernie. As much as I would like it to, I feel like, you guys want to hear something new, something fresh, something better than that. So we're going to start talking about Joe Biden, who is lost in a cornfield somewhere. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know what he's doing. Why am I here? What's happening here? So as I said before, there was a debate, and Joe Biden was leading in South Carolina by a very, very large margin, as he was endorsed by Representative Jim Clyburn, which has really helped Joe Biden. He's a very significant figure in South Carolina, and he's very good at helping people out. You know, like he'll say, I endorse Joe Biden, and more people will flock to him, and that's exactly what happened in this primary. But Jim Clyburn did not help Joe Biden when it came to his gaffes this week. So the first one came from a rally in South Carolina, where he said, "You're the ones who sent Barack Obama the presidency, and I have a simple proposition here. I'm here to ask you for your help. Where I come from, you don't go very far unless you ask. My name is Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate." Oh, man. Did you get that? He said that he was running for the Senate. Now, I don't know what Joe Biden was thinking. I don't know if he thought Senator Barack Obama, or maybe he's pulling from his way back in the day when he was actually running for senator. But this just looked very, very bad. And now Joe Biden could have turned this around. He could have said, "Oh, senator, oh, I'm so silly. I meant the presidency. I've already been a senator." But he didn't. He just sort of said, "Want to be your senator." And then that was it. That was all he said. And then he just moved on and didn't talk about it ever again. And honestly, I feel bad for the man. He can't even remember what he's running for, and sometimes he doesn't know where he is. And it's almost like his campaign manager needs to put a microphone into his ear and be like, "No, you're running for the presidency. You're running for the presidency." And then Joe Biden could be like, "Oh, I meant the presidency." But I think, to me, whenever I hear Joe Biden talking, he talks very fast. I feel like he needs to slow it down just a little bit, just a touch, and then maybe he would start making more sense. And he needs to think a little bit more. If he calms his speaking down a little bit and starts to think a little more, maybe then his ideas and his thoughts would come out more correctly. But that's just my opinion. But Joe Biden also could have used this little device that the campaign manager put in his ear in the debates as well. So during this Democratic debate, there was a lot of yelling and a lot of screaming at each other all the time, over and over again, and it was all just a bunch of ruckus. But there were some good parts to this debate. So Joe Biden was talking about guns, and he was attacking Bernie for giving gun manufacturers immunity. There was a bill that said that gun manufacturers are immune to people suing them for deaths. So gun manufacturers can't be sued for the killings of people. And Joe Biden said that 150 million Americans were killed by guns. Whoa, that is a big number. And now that wasn't just in 1 year. That was like from, as Joe Biden put it, that was from like 2006 to now. And so you might be thinking, well, that's a little bit more believable. 150 million? That's like half of the United States population. That's absolutely crazy. So I did some research, and if this number were true, 150 million Americans killed from guns, that would mean 12 million people would have to die each year. And the United States of America usually loses 2.8 million people every year. And that's not even related to guns. That's an overall average. So that number was very high. It was a very funny moment in the debate because after Joe Biden said this, instantly Bernie Sanders' hands went up, and I can imagine him being like, "Well, first of all, I have several questions." Because, I mean, he might believe it, Bernie might believe it, but he might be like, "That's a ridiculous number. That's absolutely a crazy number." And so another gaffe that happened at this debate, you know, Joe Biden was talking, and, you know, each person gets like 30 seconds to respond. And so Joe Biden is just going, and he's talking, and he's, you know, making his case. He's really pushing his case, okay? Then all of a sudden he just stops with 10 seconds left to go while he's speaking. Biden breaks the fourth wall and goes, "Why did I stop?" And then he just stops. Like, the people in the crowd laugh, and then that's it. That's all he wrote. That's the joke. He's happy. He's like, "Why did I stop?" And then he's done. Overall, Biden had an okay debate night, but to be honest, all of the candidates did okay. There wasn't really anything that stood out. You know, the best attack was from Buttigieg against Bernie that I talked about earlier, but other than that, the people are crazy, and they just continued to talk over each other nonstop, and it was actually really annoying. So with all of these gaffes coming from Joe Biden, we can see that Biden's age is just catching up with him very fast. You can see this in his stories that just seem to be weird. Like recently, he was doing a campaign rally, and he said that if a woman were to stand up, take off all of her clothes, no men should touch her, and she'd be arrested for indecent exposure. Like, yes, that's true. Men shouldn't touch women who are naked in the middle of a Democratic rally, but why? Where did that come from? Where did that idea that a woman was going to strip naked in front of everyone and then no men can touch her? Where did that come from? Where did that idea even come from? And it just seems very, very graphic. And also, we've had different stories that Joe Biden tells about little kids playing with his leg hair. I talked about that recently on an episode. I think that was like episode 4 or something. It was a very, very early episode where I talked about Joe Biden's leg hair. And these stories are just weird, and they don't make any sense. He talks about his gang member or gang rival called Corn Pop or something like that. And it really doesn't even make any sense at all. And some people are actually concerned that he is getting dementia, which I have absolutely no evidence for this. Some people are just saying that this might be an early stage of dementia, and there's really no joking about this. Honestly, if Joe Biden has dementia, that's terrible. You know, that's a horrible, horrible thing, and I don't think that he should be president, to be honest. And if his age is going to continue to cause him to be less sharp, then I think that he should step down and have someone else be the president. And it is also just interesting how, you know, Bernie Sanders is a lot older than Joe Biden. And Bernie Sanders' brain, except for all the communist stuff, seems very sharp and very on edge. And Joe Biden, it just seems different. And it's very interesting to see how older people, their brains are different. Their brains function different. You know, it might be genetics, it might be age. I don't know. I hope that Joe Biden doesn't have dementia, not just for political reasons, but for, you know, human reasons. I would hate for that to happen to him. But I do believe that Joe Biden should have a retirement, at least, I think. But in the meantime, Joe Biden's campaign is rising from the ashes. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, we have the South Carolina primaries that are happening as we speak, actually right now. And it is reported as of right now. It might change, and I'll post a original picture right now, but it is showing that Joe Biden is winning South Carolina with 51.7% of the vote. Bernie Sanders is in second with 17.9%, and Tom Steyer is in third with 12.1%. And that is very, very exciting for Joe Biden because this was his last stand. He was asked during the debate, will you drop out if you don't win South Carolina? And Joe Biden said, I will win South Carolina, meaning yes. More than likely, if he were to have lost South Carolina, he would have dropped out. So he needed to win this state big because he won. All of a sudden, this race has changed. Joe Biden is now closer to Bernie Sanders in delegates than any other person. And it just goes to show how strong African Americans are supporting Joe Biden in this fight. And now, it's interesting because African American voters are very loyal. Like, African American voters have been voting Democratic on a large scale since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They liked Obama. They want to go back to the Obama policies. And so the way to go back to the Obama policies is to vote for someone who was next to Barack Obama when those policies were taking place, and that is Joe Biden. And a lot of people were wondering, well, why aren't the African American community going more towards Kamala Harris or Cory Booker? And this is why. Because they trust Joe Biden. They see what Joe Biden has done in the past. And this isn't for every single African American. This is for a majority of the African American voting bloc that votes for Democrats. So in the end, I'm glad that Joe Biden still has a little bit of life left. I feel like this is a big turning point in his campaign, but we're going to have to be looking towards Super Tuesday, which is coming up, I believe, next Tuesday, and that will be absolutely huge. If Joe Biden can win multiple states, if South Carolina gives Joe Biden the bump that he needs, he could win more delegates in Super Tuesday, and this could end up being a very, very unique primary, as no candidate may have enough delegates to win the nomination, which would lead to a broken convention. And that would be also very interesting. What also could happen is Bernie could absolutely sweep every single state on Super Tuesday and be way too far off. And that's what we're going to have to wait for. I think more than likely, Bernie's going to do well in some states, and Joe Biden's going to do well in some states. But that will have to be a discussion for next week, and hopefully Joe Biden will get some more momentum so then we can finally kick Bernie out, okay? Wish for Bernie to get kicked out. Well, I want to thank you all for listening, liking, subscribing, and reposting my videos on Instagram. A lot of you are doing that. A lot of you are putting it on your Facebook story or Instagram story, and it has meant a lot to me as we continue to grow our little podcast. Last week we had a lot of viewers, and I was very, very excited about it, and I hope that this week we will have even more. I want to thank you for listening to the whole episode, and we are growing faster than ever before. And until next week, on Tuesday at noonish, like my mom always says, be good, be kind, be loving. Goodbye.